Hey there, and welcome to U Talk. It's a show where we connect with people across Canada and ask them about their stories, cultures, and experiences. I'm your host, Ryan Funk. Ancient Greeks believed in the Muses, deities of song, dance, and art. They would give creativity, wisdom, and insight to thinkers and artists. But humans have been doing art way before that. In a limestone cave deep within Indonesia, archaeologists believe they have found the oldest cave paintings in the world, around 45,500 years old. And that's just what we found. Who knows what hominids have been creating for thousands of years, even before that. Even today, art is in every aspect of our lives. It's in movies, books, graphics, advertisements. It's everywhere. Through art, we can tell stories and share our deepest desires or fears and pains. Today we have Colleen Gray from Art for Aid. It's a project where they help students from remote communities have access to art supplies. And we'll listen to Segun Olude, a graphic designer and teacher. And he uses art, he's been involved in art in so many different areas. And he uses art to think about social issues. Let's get into it. So I'm here again with Colleen Gray from Art for Aid, a super amazing organization. How are you doing today, Colleen?
I'm good. Thanks, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Super in a new apartment. Things are exciting. I finally have good working internet. So yeah, I'm excited and excited to continue talking with amazing people like yourself and the great work Art for Aid does. So how about we just start with on November 5th, there was an art supply collection. How did that go?
Not too bad. People are still getting used to the fact that I'm not working out of my home anymore. So I still get people coming to my door with art supplies, but I'm trying to encourage everyone to go to the shipping location in Carleton Place now. So it's getting there slowly but surely, but we did get a pretty significant amount of art supplies brought in. So just about everything, we're about 3/4 of the way through the sorting. Mm-hmm. Everything has been growing really fast with Art for Aid since COVID, and which is really, I almost feel guilty about that because so many people have been losing businesses and really in financial trouble, and we're exploding. So I think so many people are looking for a way to help, and they're looking at Art for Aid to be able to be that vehicle to help. So it's really wonderful, but there's one of me. And so it's been pretty demanding. Mm-hmm. Moving everything out of my basement and over to the shipping location was bittersweet because, I've had it under my wing, literally, for the past 9 years, so now it's somewhere else, which is, I kind of, I miss being able to just come down here and do that work. Now I have to get in the car and drive. But on the other hand, it doesn't take me 2 hours to get a can of soup anymore. So that's kind of nice. Mm-hmm.
So just to kind of cover our bases again, What exactly is Art for Aid and why are we collecting these art supplies?
Well, Art for Aid is a nationally recognized project that collects and ships new and gently used art supplies to remote Indigenous schools across the country. We work with installing skills labs as well. That's sort of a new venture. We are a project under I Love First Peoples, which is a Canadian registered charity who does the same kind of work we're doing. And so a few years ago, I Love First Peoples came to us and said, look, you're not a registered charity, so you can't accept monetary donations, which was really a drag for us. But, we were getting around it. We get people to go and get gift cards or do something else. But then they said, if you want to come under our umbrella and work with us and be one of our projects, then you have a vehicle to be able to take charitable donations. And their values and mandate are completely aligned with ours. So we're doing the same work. And really, we've been able to really expand our reach and our scope working with I Love First Peoples, and they're just wonderful. So it's been a really, really great collaboration so far. So yeah, that's kind of what we do in a nutshell, and we've been doing that for 9 years. I'm a volunteer. I don't take a salary, and yeah, I guess that's about it.
Well, it's great. So why is it important to collect this art supplies? Why are we doing this?
Indigenous students on reserve have fewer advantages than non-Indigenous students in mainstream schools. So back in 2013, when I stumbled on this giant gap in the education system in remote communities, as an artist, I kind of felt like I should do more. And as an Indigenous artist, I felt like I owed it to myself to stand up and do something more. And so the more I investigated, the more I discovered that there are really significant lacks in education in remote First Nations communities. And Inuit communities, Métis communities, they're all lacking. So why is it important? It's important because it's not fair. Students in remote communities should not have to do with less. They have really high staff turnovers in remote communities. So teachers are unfortunately, constantly shifting and changing. So these kids are putting up with a lot of changes. There's a lot of poverty, but there's a lot of victories too. We tend to focus on the negative, but I try to focus on the positive aspects of what these kids are doing with their education. And it's just phenomenal. These kids are so great, and they deserve to have the same quality education that all other students are entitled to in this country. And so the collecting of art supplies serves several purposes. It allows people a vehicle to help. Everybody's got some art supplies in their house, whether they're using them or not. There's always an abundance of art supplies. We live a privileged life. And so having that and not being able to do anything with it, you don't want to throw it away, and it's still good. So Art for Aid becomes the vehicle for that. And students get to take advantage of that because there are many schools that can't afford to bring in the kind of quality art supplies that people will donate. They can't afford the volume of art supplies that people are donating. And so by being able to take those art supplies and ship them out to schools, it allows people to help. It allows students to have access to quality art supplies. It allows the school to expand on their art budget, on their program budget. And then the kids get to do art, which is phenomenal for mental health. It is healing. It breaks isolation. It invites creative and critical thinking. So, art is really, really important. With all my heart, I believe that art can heal the world. And so if it can be used in remote communities by students, rock on. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. And without the arts, life could be incredibly dull. Like we wouldn't have movies, museums, art pieces. Like these are integral. And it's just a part of the human experience. We've been creating art of what we've seen in the world for tens of thousands of years.
It's a common thread throughout humanity and throughout history. Yeah.
Not only is Art for Aid, bringing out the supplies to these communities and kids. Skill Labs launched up in September. So why don't you just tell me a little bit about what that is and what's it going to look like moving forward?
We're so excited about the Skills Labs. Several years ago, I got to go to Natwashish in northern Newfoundland and visit a school. I've been shipping art supplies for 9 years, but I've never been able to visit any of the communities that I ship to. The reason being is it's a lot of money to fly to a remote community. It's a lot of money to just go and visit. And I can ship a lot of art supplies with $1,000. So I've opted not to do that. But when I started working with I Love First Peoples and they discovered that I hadn't been to any of these communities, they were just like, well, that can't be right. So so they flew me up to Natwashish when we were doing one of the Friendship Box presentations that they do. And I got to teach in the classroom, and I got to visit with the schools and talk to the teachers. And that was really enlightening. And so in the course of talking with the teachers and the principal, I said, what can I do to help you? And I think so often when it comes to circumstances in remote communities, people assume to know what's needed or what's wanted. And I don't like to do that. I would rather ask, what do you need? And so in the course of that ask, the principal and the teacher said, you know what, we'd love to have a sewing program. Well, that was all I needed, because I'm a person who can get things, and I'm a bridge builder. So when I came back here, I put the word out to my network and said, this is what I need for a sewing skills lab. And, within a few short weeks, I had a basement full of sewing supplies and sewing machines, and then the cost of shipping, of course, is astronomical. So we had Rotary clubs who came in to help us look after the shipping aspect. And it was absolutely astounding how it all came together so fast. CBC did a wonderful little blurb on the sewing program in Natwashi. So that was really nice to get that. And then the following year, we thought, this was just so successful. Like, we have to keep building on this. Mm-hmm. And so Jose, I started looking for sewing machines to see what would be appropriate. We wanted to work with elementary students. We wanted to see what's out there. So research is a huge, huge and onerous part of what I do. And I have become a very good researcher. In the course of trying to find sewing machines, I came across Genome Canada, which is a wonderful organization. I found one of their sewing machines, and I copied it and I sent it to Jose and said, what do you think about this for the students? We were going to fundraise the money for the machines, and people were really excited about being able to purchase these machines for the schools. So Genome, when they looked at the sewing machine that we had selected, had informed us that, as cute as it was, it would not stand up to the rigors of an elementary school education, and it would probably break in a year. So we were a little bit disappointed, but Genome really liked our project, and they really liked our vision. And so they stepped in and they donated 60 brand new sewing machines to the project. Each one of these machines retails at $950. Like, staggering.
That's a chunk of change.
So we were just gobsmacked. I mean, how do you reply to that kind of generosity other than, we're building a shrine to you tomorrow? we were pretty excited. And so then the next leg became, how do you find the schools? Because you have to have the infrastructure to be able to house a program that size. A lot of schools are run out of portables. Some of them are very, very small. There's not a lot of room. So if you're going to put 10 or 15 machines in a school and the program supplies, there has to be a place to store it. There has to be, so there's a lot of logistics there. So after researching, Jose has traveled across Canada, and I think has visited something like 90 of these communities. So she really has a handle on where to go. So anyway, she discovered a couple of schools that were interested in the program and had the infrastructure in place. And so we started making arrangements to put everything in place, and it was seamless. Everything came together and gelled in a way that was just mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. The Baffinland Iron Mines is a resource company up there who, with some of these communities that we were going into, they're in those communities, and a big part of their mandate is to better the community, to bring something to the community. Mm-hmm. So they partnered with us and helped us with shipping, and are continuing to help us with shipping. The Rotary Club chipped in and helped us. It's just so overwhelming. Like, as soon as we come up with an idea or a plan, all of the people just come together and help us. We had people buying sewing machines to help with shipping and to pay for the purchase of a machine for schools. So we now have 4 schools up and running. We are in, sorry, I'm really talking a lot here, right?
No worries. It's exciting stuff.
Interviewer's dream, right? So we are in Pond Inlet, Igloolik, Natwashish, and Nain, Labrador. So those are the 4 schools we're working on right now. We have a 5th school online, but I think we're still waiting for confirmation. The machines themselves are absolutely beautiful. They've been retrofitted with the child safety guards as well, so that little fingers don't get injured. And beyond that, the benefit to the community is astronomical because these machines are strong enough to be able to sew through hide and through canvas. So if you are a subsistence hunter or you live off the land, a canvas tent is a very important part of your toolkit. To repair these things is a pain. And so with a sewing machine, it's like zip and it's done, right? You've got the ability to really get people back out on the land quickly. So yeah, it's exciting. It's really exciting to watch this develop. I'm just formulating a contact sheet now to send out to the schools, asking them if they can send us some pictures, some information, give us an actual update so that I can build my report for Genome and for the people who have helped us to get this to where it is today.
I think the cool part of that is just once you had the idea for this, a concept for this initiative, people, they all came together in a collaborative effort. And I think just for the average person, they want to help. They want to be able to find ways to help those less fortunate than themselves and, make it better for everyone, the world a better place. But for many, they don't know how to do it. Well, what are you supposed to do? Like, oh, there's these communities that are suffering or underprivileged. Well, what can I do? So it's great to hear about Art for Aid, being that, kind of that stepping stone for people to find a way to help out.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited too. I'm excited. People have really embraced this project in a big way.
An exciting thing. It's getting recognized. You were one of 14 recipients to receive the Governor General Award back in September. Super busy time. You have your skills lab and sewing project going, and you won this award. Well, what was your reaction when, they told you were going to be one of the recipients?
Found out back in 2019 that I was a recipient. I was really blown away. I mean, who does that ever happen to, right? So I got a phone call here one June afternoon from the office of the Governor General, and I actually thought it was a friend of mine. So I totally made an idiot of myself. I thought it was a joke, and I responded as though it was a joke. And then
when big news comes like that, like what are you supposed to do? Like, this can't be real. Well, you're pulling my leg.
I said, "This is Kathy. Smarten up, Kathy. What do you want, you idiot?" Yeah, right. And so when the lady, very kind lady, very patient lady on the phone reassured me that this was in fact the Office of the Governor General and that I had been nominated and would be receiving the Sovereign Medal for Volunteers, I didn't even know what she kept talking, and all I could hear was buzzing in my head. There was just nothing was registering. And so she said, "Are you still with me?" At one point, because I wasn't saying anything. And I said, "I am really sorry, but I need you to start over and talk to me again, because nothing that you've said has sunk in. I'm really trying to process this, but I just can't. It's coming in."
Yeah, that dazed moment.
Right. So she was wonderfully patient with me. And so she told me everything that was going to happen. And then, of course, COVID hit and everything got locked down. And so just this past year, they started doing ceremonies. As a matter of fact, the one that I went to was the very first one since COVID lockdown.
Very exciting.
I know, right? And then to Mary May Simon. I mean, come on, an Indigenous Governor General is the person standing to give me the award. That was just everything to me. And so I brought my husband and my daughter with me. We were limited to how many people we could bring, and they had a wonderful event. It was at Rideau Hall. Never been there before. Pretty impressive. It was really nice. Really, really nice. I felt very honored.
Oh, it's a great honor, as well as just bringing more awareness to the cause. Like it's a success for Art for Aid as well.
Yes, very, very much so. It's all about Art for Aid for me.
Awesome. So a cool thing that Art for Aid is doing, the Bare Heart contact cards, going over to the social media and the website. Incredibly cute stuff right there for that.
Not great.
What can you tell me about it?
We often have people who want to reach out, like youth that want to reach out to the communities and let them know that they're not forgotten, that we're learning, and in school there are very strong Indigenous programming is now happening on a regular basis in schools. And so more and more youth are learning about some of the challenges that are being faced, and about the many victories that Indigenous students are also moving forward with. So in the course of that education, a lot of these students are looking for ways to reach out. So they do art supply fundraisers in the school and so on and so forth. But I also wanted the kids to be able to personally connect. Mm-hmm. And so again, I go back to my bridge building skills, and I thought, how can I connect these two? How can I make a connection? It doesn't have to be reciprocal, because you can travel only one way on a bridge, or you can travel both. Mm-hmm. So in the course of trying to figure something out, I came across a way, because art is an incredible medium that does not require language or understanding of language. And so I started inviting non-Indigenous youth in schools to create these cards. I have a template that people can download to create these cards. Draw a positive picture, draw something, or say something if you're not an artist. You don't have to draw, but just some way to create the building of a bridge between a remote community and youth outside of that community. And so the Bear Heart Contact cards is bear because that is our logo, and heart because these messages come from the heart, and contact cards because that's what's happening. It's making contact. And so we invite students to create these cards. We put them in our shipments of art supplies to the schools, and the children in these communities can see that other students outside of the community, their peers, are connecting with them from across the miles.
The more we're connecting with others at a younger age, the better unity will become. Like the worst thing you can do is have that segregation, like this person over here, this person over there. Like unless you're meshing and getting to know them, you can't have those perfect dialogues. Like you mentioned at the beginning, wanting to, like, not thinking about what they need, but listening to them and hearing about what they need, not thinking about from your perspective. It's great to have those connections and starting it out.
It's really great, and it gives young people they feel like they're contributing. They feel like they're doing something, to help or to support, or to, at the very least, to let a student know that they're thought of. To be thought of is a wonderful thing. It's the opposite of that is to be forgotten, to be apathetically ignored. And so, for students, young people, their same age, to reach out across the miles, I think it's wonderful. I don't often get feedback from these communities, but I don't have to. I know that they're appreciated. I know the art supplies are appreciated. I know the contact cards are appreciated. So it's building a bridge.
In September, we had National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Personally, I feel like maybe it wasn't executed to the best of what it could potentially become. But what are your thoughts on this day and this kind of recognition of what's going on in Indigenous communities?
Well, it's a great start. It's a really great start, and everything that is healing has to start somewhere, and so awareness is a big part of that. It goes way beyond just wearing an orange shirt on September 30th. And that's what I try to punctuate with people. It's about so much more than an orange shirt. The orange shirt, to me, for young people, is a doorway. It's an open doorway to learn more. And so all of a sudden, mommy and daddy are buying orange shirts, and everybody's wearing an orange shirt. And why? How come we're wearing this orange shirt? What's Phyllis's story? So the schools have no choice but to step forward with Phyllis's story, because these kids are going, what are we wearing an orange shirt for? So there is now connection to a traumatic past in our country from young people. And that's important, because if they grow up with that knowledge, they can grow up knowing how to make change. They can grow up knowing that this was wrong, but we can't do this again. We have to move forward in a positive way. Education, knowledge is all power. It's all key to change. I think there has to be truth before there can be reconciliation. I really believe that. I don't think there's enough truth. I think it's been, wonderfully skimmed over by orange shirts. So I hope to see more of that coming forward. I hope as they more and more deep scans are done of the earth, and more children are brought home. This is the beginning of a long, long line of pain that's going to be ripped open. And like any festering wound, it has to be opened up for the festering to be let out. And so this is, the people are going to have to just be gentle, be gentle with Indigenous people, and be understanding and learn, be good allies if they're not Indigenous, and be good allies if they are Indigenous. There's a lot of lateral violence in the Indigenous communities as well. So I think as human beings, we have to be kind and understanding and learn about each other's past and about each other's history if we're ever going to move forward in healing. So yeah, I think it's a great start. I love that so many young people were engaged in this. That to me is everything. That's the big step forward for me, was that young people are learning about truth and reconciliation and what it actually means, not just what the title is.
Yeah, I know, driving around the city that day, and the week leading up to it, seeing the orange handprints. I know there was the atrocity that took place earlier in the summer. When we found the children's bodies, and people have been recognized, and kind of keeping that in the view for conversations. But yeah, seeing the kids get engaged, start having conversations, it's been great to see, because I know when I was growing up in school, we never had these conversations. It was just something that was just like, they're Indigenous peoples, they're out on their reserves, kind of just
they're out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, so it's great to see those conversations, and I would like to see this kind of day grow and develop. I think it was the new Governor General who like in a press conference was saying, like, when Justin Trudeau missed out on the first day, it's like, well, a prime minister would never miss a Remembrance Day event, and these is mostly for people who've already passed on. Sort of the hypocrisy.
Yeah, that was a missed opportunity, boy. He really didn't do that one very well.
You're like, buddy, it's all you have to do is just show up. That's the minimum.
Yeah. Tofino.
Yeah. And it's just a thing that needs to develop, like a federal holiday, federal workers getting the day off. Like for the normal workers, that's fine. Having a day off is great. Go find out. But, for our policymakers, come on, let's get to work. Maybe make it a day where it's like, we're specifically focusing on Indigenous issues this day. I mean, that's like a small thing you could do. I don't know. I'm not a politician.
I think I would rather than see a day off, I would rather see a day of education. Where workplaces bring in Indigenous elders, they bring in people who can do Indigenous crafts and bring in traditional knowledge. I think if we show people who we are, we become less of those poor Indigenous people, and more of, wow, what a cool group of people, and what a terrible thing happened in their history. I think if we bring that to the table, in corporations, can you imagine everybody sitting down to do beading or moccasin classes, or listening to an elder talk about some of the traditional stories? Something like that, I think, holds more value than a day off to go shopping or to go to the park. I mean, I don't, my September 30th, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what can I do today that will make an impact for youth tomorrow. And I'm sure I could go pack art supplies. I could have done that, but I do that all the time. But I wanted to do something more meaningful. And so I put on my rubber boots, and I grabbed my gloves and some garbage bags, and I traveled the ditches picking garbage for the day. So I thought, what better way than to make the earth a better place for the kids, right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. Not just having that day off, but being actively involved in learning and activities. Yeah, that's definitely the way to go for days and kind of awareness like that. And in terms of like, bringing in elders and indigenous knowledge keepers, you're right. There's this fount of knowledge that is not being utilized in our Canadian and just North American society. When colonizers came, they threw out the indigenous perspective and like, nope, the West is the correct way to do things. And I've had this conversation with my friend a couple of times. He's a scientist, and I was like, well, I mean, Western science has, done a lot for the world, but what if we kind of utilize that with indigenous knowledge keepers and the knowledge that they've they've been preserving the environment for tens of thousands of years before, like, what is it, the 1960s, when scientists were like, yeah, maybe we should be a little bit nicer with how we're consuming everything. So maybe that more collaborative approach, getting the elders in. I don't know if this would work at all, but my thought is, getting elders into our schools to teach everyone about that perspective. You have the normal education system, and this is built into it. And then maybe involvement in the land. You're going out to learn, preserve, protect, and we can develop this sense of ownership for the environment. I don't know if that would work or not, but just in my head, I think that would be fun.
Whether it's Indigenous youth or non-Indigenous youth, if you connect a child to the land and you teach them how to love the land, they're going to care for this planet in a better way. We can't leave here. It's not like we can take off and go.
No matter how much Elon Musk keeps telling us,
we just can't. It's just, this is the way it is, and we're destroying the planet. We're killing the water. If we don't stop pulling bricks out of the wall, there's not going to be a wall left. There's so many things going on. The space junk alone is out of control. Not only are we destroying this planet, we're destroying the space around our planet. Like, oh my God, where does it stop? And now we're going to start sending out, more junk to other planets. So I don't know. It begins right in the front yard. When I do speaking engagements with kids, one of the things that I tell them is that every time you stop, you walk by a piece of garbage and you look at it, and if you walk by it, no harm, no foul. It's not going to cost you anything to stop and pick it up. It's not going to cost you anything to walk by it. But I can promise, when you stop and pick that piece of garbage up, the earth you're standing on knows what you've done. Everything has energy. Energy cannot die. It's impossible. It is scientifically proven. Energy cannot die. So if you put a piece of good energy into something that you're doing for the planet will know it and feel it. So I try to impart this on young people. And I think some get it, and I think a lot don't, but I think they'll remember. If they feel something, they'll remember. People will always remember how you made them feel. So, I think if we focus more on the education of caring for the planet, put gardens in schools. Part of the education process is teaching young people how to turn soil, how to compost. This is not rocket science, but this is the stuff that grows new life on this planet.
Community farms, community food,
yes.
Allowing us to be a little less disconnected, or I guess a little more disconnected from the supply chain, giving us more ownership and control of ourselves, so we're not reliant on grocery stores and multi-billion-dollar corporations. There's a lot of things. And just empowering individuals, giving people the resources and rights that they need to succeed. And then, it's a start. I think I'm starting to see. I know it's very easy to get that doomer mindset, like, doesn't matter, everything is over, let's just whatever.
We're existing now.
There are seeds out there, and I think if we continue to have these conversations, continue to empower and educate our youth that, hey, even if things get rough over the next kind of 50 or so years, maybe in the decades afterwards, we'll start to see improvements. We can't wait until it's too late. It's already too late. We got to start now if we're going to try and change things.
there are all these arguments around climate change, global warming, and you get a million people for and a million people against, and a million people who are saying, well, no, it's not that, it's this. Everybody has an opinion, but while you're voicing your opinion, what are you doing to help? You can talk all you want, but if you're not doing anything other than talking about your opinion, then you're part of the problem. You have to do the ugly, crappy stuff, like, going out and picking up the garbage, to write a letter to your government and say, look, this waterway is polluted. You have to be involved in the grassroots organizations that are fighting for the environment. Whether you believe in the science or not, pollution is real. We have to deal with that. Global warming is happening. Whatever is causing it, that's not everybody's fight,
And even if it wasn't true, isn't it better to have a more healthy relationship to the planet than just consume?
Yes, err on the side of caution. You can't lose.
Exactly. And I mean, I think it's a little funny quotation marks. I mean, if everything just falls apart, well, those who've relied on Western society aren't going to be able to succeed in that new environment. And it's going to be those with survival skills and understanding of the land, such as our Indigenous people, that will be able to survive through there.
Yeah. The people who are already living off the land.
I guess ironic would be the correct word in that situation.
Yeah, very ironic.
Just got to kind of move forward. We kind of got a little off topic.
We're up on a tangent. Yeah. Solving all the Earth's problems.
What's next for Art for Aid? What's going on? I know there's a lot of artwork that is available to help fundraise some of these efforts. What's going on? What's next? What's kind of the plan?
We're developing more skills labs. I'm looking right now at developing a 3D printer skills lab.
Ooh, 3D printing.
Yeah. So when you think about, the positive attributes around 3D printing, if you're a hunter and your gun stock breaks and you're in a remote community, you may be waiting weeks, maybe months before you can get a gun stock. Well, if you can 3D print a gun stock and slap it on your rifle, you're out hunting again, right? So you can, there's food security in being able to make sure that the tools of subsistence hunting are able to be repaired. For young people to be able to, oh my gosh, there's so much involved in this, and I don't want to go too far into it because we're still in the really infant step planning stages, but we're looking at trying to develop 3D printing resources in the North. We're looking at, I'm always brainstorming, different ways that we can positively impact. I work on synthetic paper with ground mineral watercolor. That's my art form. I really, really want to start getting this into remote schools. I want high school students to really be able to hang on to this. It's kind of an advanced technique for young people. It's a very expensive process to, the paints themselves are, anywhere from $20 to $40 a tube. So it becomes very expensive, and little kids love to use volumes of stuff. So
as we've seen in any kind of nursery school during finger painting day.
For sure. So, I mean, I keep, filtering the art supplies to a lot of elementary students, but I also recognize the incredible value that Indigenous older students, high school students have as far as developing their art. I don't think they get enough supplies. They don't get a variety of things to engage them. And this particular medium of creativity is so unique. And it's not the kind of thing, it doesn't lend itself to everybody. I find people who are classically trained artists really struggle with this technique because this doesn't fit into the parameters that they've been constructed with. And so I tell people when I teach them, like, every rule you know about working with watercolor, you can just leave at the door because none of it applies here. And it really freaks a lot of people out. But young people don't have that barrier. Young people seem to be able to set aside any rules very quickly and move forward into doing something really unique. So my next big project is to work with high school students and make packages and send these synthetic paper packages with the art palettes up there and get them experimenting with this and playing with it. It lends itself wonderful to ink work. So I'd like to, maybe do some ink work as well. Maybe, start visiting some of these communities once everything is safer and teach this technique to high school students, and then start, bringing their art forward and showing the world what they're capable of. I want to elevate them from an artistic perspective. I want the world to see how brilliant these young people are. They're amazing, really amazing.
Yeah, no, and that sounds incredibly promising, and I'm excited to see where it all goes. It'd be great to see in a news article, Indigenous high schoolers new revolutionary technique, or throwing the rules of watercolor out the window.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's the plan.
Well, it was great talking to you and hearing about all the amazing things that Art for Aid is doing, and I'm excited to see what's next and what's coming down the pipeline. Where can people go to find out more information about this project?
Well, we keep the website up to date pretty well. So that's www.artforaid.ca. You can check our blog. We usually keep any projects that are running, anything new, we try to update the blog. We have our Shopify store that is our fundraising store, and that's the artforaidshop.ca. So if people are looking for really cool Christmas gifts, that is the place to go. And 100% of the proceeds from the store all go towards Art for Aid. I don't take a salary off of this. I'm a volunteer. Let me see. You can sign up for the newsletter on any of these websites. The newsletter will keep everybody up to date on what we're doing. And whenever we have our supply collection dates, we also send that out through the newsletter and our social media as well, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on like pick
everywhere.
We're everywhere. And watch for our 5-colored bear. Our bear is now an internationally known symbol. I was sent an email from someone in Singapore who said that they saw one of my cards on a shelf in a store in Singapore. Go figure. So we're everywhere. So just come and find us. Send me an email if there's any questions. I'd be happy to speak with anybody who's wondering what's next.
I'm Segun Olude, and I sort of wear many hats, but one at a time. As some people would actually know me as a university lecturer, because I taught graphic design for 11 years at the University of Manitoba. Some people might know me as a storyteller, because I wrote a book on my indigenous language, Yoruba, which is from southwest Nigeria. And some will know me as a graphic designer. And I've done anything from brochures, being part of a team that designs stamps for Canada Post. I've done several corporate identities. I can go on, websites, whatever, everything that the graphic designer does. So those are 3 major areas of my personality. But there's also one where every year, my wife and I go to Nigeria, to the rural areas, to teach leaders and community involved individuals and youth about how to engage in their own development of their own communities, so that they don't just sit and wait for assistance that's not coming. So those are the major areas, apart from, right now I'm working as a graphic designer for an international NGO that works in 47 countries. So that's pretty much who I am and what I do.
Yeah, so you're a very busy individual.
Indeed. Keeps me out of trouble.
I know a couple of people who just kind of like wear all those different hats and always wanting to put a new feather in their cap. And they're always on the move, and it's always exciting to see what they're up to next. In terms of graphic design, what first attracted you to that?
Well, I think it's something that grew out of a childhood love for drawing. You know, I grew up in Africa where in my very first years, we lived in a house that, you know, had a lot of sand around it, you know, sand, because everything was so fresh at that time. And I would always sit outside and draw chicken and draw cars and anything in the sand. And then one day my dad got tired of that and got me a pad of paper and pencils. And I'm talking like at age 4. So that was like heaven to me. And from then I just drew. And of course, through school, drawing and art became my major love subjects. And from there, I ended up in an institution called Yaba College of Technology in Nigeria to do fine art. And I would have thought I'd come out as a painter. But once I knew about graphic design, that was it. Something that was practical, something that I could look at problems and resolve. It just grew from there. And that way led to coming over to University of Manitoba to do a 4-year honors course in graphic design. And of course, from there, it went on to 2 masters and teaching graphic design, working as graphic designer. It just seems like that's the only thing that I know.
When someone has that passion, like regardless of the medium they have to work with, it's always impressive to see what people can do. There is a boy, I think it's in Pakistan. His passion is robotics, and he just watched YouTube videos, and now he's making all these cool robotics. So it's just cool hearing your story that the passion started so early, that you didn't have many materials at the beginning, but it was still kind of fostered that love for the craft. You also mentioned painting. So in terms of graphic design compared to other art styles,
I think the major difference would be that, well, these days, I am a little more careful about the definition, but I'll explain what I think about it. For painting, I can, you know, like what you see behind me, let's see if you can see it. For painting, I could wake up and say, oh, I have this inspiration to, you know, paint a woman, and I would use these colors, and, you know, because blue represents something to me. Everything is kind of subjective. Some things are subliminal, some things are driven by emotion, and some things are just basically the urge to create. Whereas with graphic design, it's always aiming to resolve either a problem or bring forward a concept in a practical way. Graphic design would be, okay, we're building a new airport and we need signage. And part of graphic design is doing interior graphics, you know, where are things going to be placed optimally, where people would see them, and how do they understand it, and all that. So all of those do come into play. So we use principles of mathematics, we use principles of visual communication, we use psychology principles, we use principles from, you know, just basic eye-hand interaction in some places. So graphic design brings all those things to the table to say, yes, this is the problem, and we've got to resolve it. And it's a little bit different then from, say, painting or drawing, where you're inspired to bring something out. People like it, they don't like it. It doesn't really matter. You know, you could do a painting and somebody loves it enough to pay 40 million for it. And somebody else will be like, what is this? You know, it's in the eyes of the beholder. But if you, in graphic design, do a sign that doesn't work, you could mislead people. I remember years ago going through one particular airport, and I would not name the airport. There was renovations at the airport. We literally ended up at another terminal because of one wrongly placed arrow. And that was it. So graphic design works with architects, engineers, interior designers, works for printers, works in almost every industry. In fact, design, that word design is at the core of everything. So it's just planning, it's executing. And it's more rigorous in the sense that you do have deadlines, you have things you must take into account. Look at the interior of the space you're working with, what colors are used there. Can it work on my sign? No, I want there to be contrast so people can see the sign against the background of the colors in the hallway. Long before gender neutral bathrooms where signage was required, I had already been giving my students exercises to come up with gender neutral signs. And it's very interesting to see the direction that each one is taking it based on what they knew. So graphic design definitely is a more, I would say, practical on a regular basis form of art, if you will. But they're all related. These days, you have art that looks like design and design that looks like art. The lines are not quite straight and cut like before. Now we have all sorts of, organic interactions between the two. So I wouldn't say one is better than the other, but definitely graphic design is, it's more like a science, if you will.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You're working for an organization or a client. You have a specific, purpose that you have to, create for. But within those limitations, you can be like really creative. I think the same thing is in terms of writers or game developers. If they're given freedom, when we're seeing a lot of cartoons or shows where they don't have any oversight or limitations, things go off the walls sometimes. But yeah, when you have constraints and you're trying to be creative and flexible within it, it can really create something really unique and cool. So you're mentioning about all these different aspects and these creative approaches to these projects and this almost scientific aspect to this particular form of art. What do you most enjoy about it?
Well, that's, let me just use an anecdote for answering that question, because I was working on a project 2 months ago and having so much fun with it. I turned to someone and I said, please don't let them know how much I'm enjoying this, or they might not pay me. If you wake me up at night, there are some things that would quickly wake me up. If you said, hey, let's drive from Winnipeg to Saskatoon, I will be up. If you said, hey, a company needs a new logo by morning because it's super urgent, I will be at my computer within 4 minutes. But there are other things that you couldn't get me to move on. I'll just be like, well, just forget it. So I really enjoy doing the work, going through the process, looking for solution for each and every problem that I encounter along the way, doing the research, and laying the foundation, borrowing from all the knowledge of history that I know and knowledge of cultures that I know, and bringing everything to the table. That's really just enjoyable.
There's a Reddit page called r/bad designs, and it just focuses on all, like, not just graphic design, but a whole lot of different aspects. And when something isn't thought about correctly, it can really go haywire. I think there's one, it's a rotating sign, but it's between two other signs, but it's just kind of bouncing back and forth. What would you say is the most challenging aspect of going from a concept when a client or the organization comes like, hey, we need this, to actually, making it a reality?
I think there could be several things that would be challenging. It could be the designer themselves that don't know what they're doing. Let's just get that out of the way. That happens. It's not always a client's fault or the organization's fault, but sometimes the dynamics within an organization can set a project on the wrong direction. If you have a very powerful person with a powerful opinion, that could be a challenge. It could derail the solution. If you have someone who's knowledgeable to a point and they have a strong opinion about, let's say, even a color, that could be a major challenge. And it's just little things like that, that could be a problem when you're working towards a solution. Some of them are easy to solve and some not so easy. So I would say it's the interaction with others, even members of your own team, if they have specific knowledge about something and they're unyielding, to get new information, that could be a challenge. So it's just the human interaction area that proves to be challenging. And sometimes a client might have their own, what they call committee or board, and you don't know it. You sit with them, you explain things to them, and it's clear while you're doing that. But when they go to explain it to others, it's not using your words, and they're more, if they value the opinions of those people more than yours, you could be going around on a project for a long time. So those are some of the areas that I personally find challenging. Otherwise, it's a fun,
Yeah, it's almost like a game of telephone sometimes, where things can get lost in translation between different people as it moves down the line. In terms of projects like that, the challenging aspect, that kind of pushes you to get creative and, put a unique spin on things is incredibly fulfilling. Like you mentioned, you need a project last minute, you're like jumping on that computer right away to get to it. So you have this massive passion for graphic design and art. When did you realize you wanted to, also teach and, become a lecturer?
That's a very interesting question. Early on in my journey to learn graphic design, you have different kinds of teachers, different instructors. And I would say even from day one, I noticed the differences between the instructors. And I would always say at the back of my head, if I ever get to teach, I will do this. If I ever get to teach, I will not do this. So over the years, I've always sort of thought, one day I might be in a position where I'll be teaching. And then that came in 2004, where the opportunity just showed up. And I'm like, wow, this is the time that I've always wanted to have. Initially it was shock, initially it was fear. And then, wait a minute. Finally, I found that, I'm going to go in there and teach people the way that I have always wanted to be taught. And that was it for me.
That first moment going up to teach, it's almost like going on stage to perform, or at least that's the way I kind of picture it when you're going out in front of students.
It is. It's actually, it never goes away for me. Every first class in every semester or term, there's this worry or fear. It's like, I'm meeting new students. Who are they going to be? What do they know? How can I enhance their lives? How can I share knowledge with them? And things like that. It never goes away. I actually think it's a good thing because it keeps you on your toes as a teacher.
Yeah.
The other thing about teaching is if you are not engaged in the industry and you're teaching, it's kind of like an abstract. Personally, I feel that every teacher should be actually engaged in the work itself, so that you know what the current requirements will be, you know where the industry is going, you know what kinds of challenges are happening, and you actually can envision what's coming. That's one of the ways that, keeping up with the news alone was enough for me to start giving out assignments about gender neutrality long before it became a requirement. So those are the kinds of things
That's a good approach to things, being aware of kind of the ecosystem of everything beforehand when you're starting to see those conversations. Because right now, we're seeing last year BLM and LGBTQS rights with Pride just recently happening. You see a lot of these major corporations kind of hopping on the bandwagon like right at the end to be like, oh, look how woke we are, come buy our products. But yeah, you if you want to actually be ahead of the curve, you gotta pay attention to those ecosystems.
Very much so. And we know the world is very different today. People depend a lot on metrics, how many things people are clicking on, what's trending, and so on and so forth. And that converts into sales or getting people to be aware of a product or, whatever it is. I think I have a lot of opinion about those, but yes, the more visionary companies are ahead of the game when it comes to social issues because they're actually engaged. Those who jump on the bandwagon later, you can tell when they're not authentic. And that's the word that I like to share with people all the time, that authenticity is so important when you're going to, be part of any movement. It may be just enough to just make a statement and leave it there, but when you start splashing all these symbols and slogans all over your website and it's not authentic, of course, so many people are outed, so many companies have been outed, like, hey, you're saying Black Lives Matter, but hey, this is what you're doing in the background. So authenticity is at the heart of all of those things. And sometimes it has nothing to do with graphic design, but it has a lot to do with corporate design, the design of the corporation itself or the firm. What are their beliefs? What kind of social responsibility do they have? And all those things. So we could go on and on about that for hours.
Yeah, and I think a good example would be the Every Child Matters movement, where you see people wearing the shirts going to individuals to get the hashtag Every Child Matters to kind of stand together for these walks. And then you see a number of companies, and then in the media you hear about people calling them out for trying to make a profit off of this movement. And yeah, it's that authenticity, being ahead of the curve and helping out. It'd be a completely different story if they're like, hi, every purchase from these shirts goes to help this kind of organization or cause, but trying to turn a profit for it. Not the coolest thing to
not
do.
The coolest. It's kind of sad that society has progressed to the point where society itself is on sale. That's what if somebody gave me a grant and said, hey, don't do any work for the next 6 months, go write a book, I would write it Society on Sale. Is the book that I would write. And graphic designers have a huge responsibility as part of that. What kind of knickknacks are you selling? How long are they going to last? Would they break down? That they're biodegradable. Is there a biodegradable solution to this thing that you're trying to help this company sell? You've got to ask all the right questions. Why are you getting on this bandwagon? Why do you want to sell T-shirts? And we see where some political parties, not in Canada so far, thankfully, where some political parties would sell merchandise with current slogans and, just to get an edge. Society is really got to be very careful, and maybe we start reining these things in before we lose everything, where, only money talks and nobody else has a voice. Those are some of the things that we really need to pay attention to. Graphic designers have a huge responsibility when it comes to this.
Like with our the younger generations, like Gen Zs and the ones coming up, they seem to have a really good mind for everything in terms of social media, social issues, and just kind of marketing and bringing awareness to things. They seem to be really on lock with everything. So I'm feeling optimistic about how things will change as, these younger generations are getting into the workforce. But yeah, like you mentioned, slogans and society's on sale, and we definitely need to be incredibly careful with that, because it's an incredibly slippery slope.
It is a slippery slope. There are so many issues in society that we should be dealing with, rather than get carried away with trending slogans. There was no trending slogan at one time, and we were able to come around campfires and resolve issues and say, hey, my people were wrong. My ancestors were wrong. There was nobody spreading this around the world that makes it harder for people to sit down and actually resolve issues. So I hope we come back to a place where politics and corporations and institutions don't take everything away from society at the very basics. Well, like I say, designers have a responsibility when it comes to that, and we have to keep an eye on that ball. And hopefully other people involved in other parts of society keep their eyes on their balls too, so that we all are playing fairly on the field.
What first attracted you? What first lit that spark to talk with communities and students about social issues?
I think if we don't have society, we will not have design. It's as simple as that. And you also can design a more livable society, a society that's kinder, a society that's more empathic. And if we don't, make conscious efforts, and that's where design comes to it again, making a conscious effort to say, okay, this is what we want to see, and then start to move in that direction to a really just society, not one that's living on slogans all the time. If we have a society where what concerns me concerns you, then when we come to the table, it will be like working on a team. You see, when we're working on a graphic design team, you are good with UX, I am good with typography, and this person is good with colors. We all come and we start talking, hey, we should use Helvetica now. Maybe we should keep it to the thinnest and then make the highlights bold and this and that. That will be the typographer speaking. And the UX person will be like, why don't we move the images a little to the bottom so they can read the text and the text reader can read it right away. And the person, who's passionate about colors will say, hey, I know the colors that will give us the most contrast. So this is how we work on a team. But when it comes to today's society, we're moving in the direction of, oh, you did this, and we are suffering because of it. Of course, historically, yes. Of course, the truth is yes. But if we come to the table and say, this is the problem, how can we resolve it together? Then everyone brings their best ideas to the table, rather than, having one part saying we're in charge and the other part saying we're the opposition. It doesn't help me as a designer to think of society like that at all. Where can you imagine going to work today, and in your mind, when you get to work, there are people who are going to stand there and oppose every single thing you try to do. This is the kind of society we've built. If it worked in the 1800s, or 1700s? Is it time to change that? Can we come to a different place now where all the best come together to bring their best, rather than every time you make a pronouncement and there are people opposing it and say, I think they're wrong, this is the nonsense they did it before and they're doing it again. I would be sick. I would actually be very sick if I'm an individual who has to be in government where there is this opposition that's waiting for me every day to shoot down everything that I say or do. So we have to come to a more just society where we have round tables, where we have circles, where we all come together with our best, where if you bring a problem to the table, I have to take as much interest in that problem as the ones that I bring to the table. We have to get there.
There's always opposition and defense. It's always, everyone gets defensive. Everyone's trying to be like, my thought is the correct thought. Yeah, my approach is the right way. But yeah, that more collaborative approach to things is definitely what we need to continue to do, because otherwise it's just going to keep going around and round and round in circles. And I hear complaints about that all the time in terms of government, that nothing seems to ever really get done.
Nothing really gets done because of all the dynamics within, and the things that you don't think a priority get the priority because, somebody is much louder about it. When I came into this country, and I try not to mention names, not to embarrass anyone, I went into a First Nation community with a friend. Most of my friends when I first came were from First Nations, and we went to a First Nations community. And the conditions that I saw there were alarming, quite a surprise. Why should it still be the same today? That means the decision makers, wherever they are, whoever they are not taking that problem as if it is their own problem. So we've got to come to that place where any problem anywhere in our society is ours to solve. And therefore, we must all be involved. We must all engage. We can't hear of a problem and say, oh, no, it's this people's problem or that people's problem, those people's problem. No, it is our problem. Until we take ownership, it's not going to get solved. We're in the same car, and if the engine is not working well, it's not working well. So those are some of the issues.
Anyways, coming back to graphic design, just kind of finishing up, what are some of the trends that you're currently seeing? We mentioned a little bit about, maybe the slogans are maybe a bit too much in terms of, corporations taking advantage of them. What positive changes or positive trends you're seeing, and what advice would you give to new graphic design students or people heading into the industry? What advice would you give them?
Just looking in the rearview mirror and then looking ahead the road. There are certain patterns that I see. One pattern that is being there is we started out as artists, and then we became commercial artists. And then we broke off into illustrators, graphic designers, and this and that. And then, of course, graphic design broke off into web design. We still have graphic design on the side. And today, the work that a graphic designer does is got a new label, depending on where you are. And it's a UI, UX designer, however you say it. And we keep playing with these words, but the core of this that doesn't go away is design. So what do I see coming? If I could, I would learn some serious coding, not just read code and say, oh yeah, I see where the problem is, change that tag. That's about where I am. But any serious design student today that really wants to have longevity in the business, I believe they need to learn some code. whether it's Swift, whether it's playing with, HTML. You've got to have some knowledge of code and how it can help you in your work. I think we're going in that direction. But one of the beautiful things that I'm excited about for the future of design generally and UI UX is accessibility, where it doesn't matter what your visual impairment is, what your auditory impairments are, that you can access the same information as everyone else. You see, when we're talking about just societies, that is our own part of that society that we must maintain. And we've got to learn to use the tools to do that and know what the principles are. When I had an accident that stopped me from being able to see in one eye for quite a long time, I understood exactly why you couldn't use certain contrasts and sizes for text. Mm-hmm. So thankfully today we can, pinch and swipe and all sorts. And if you want to see closer, you can just zoom in, and enlarge things. Of course, years ago when everything was static, everything was printed, you couldn't zoom in, so you have to have readable type for different visual equities. And some people have to have what we call large type books or large type print books, and others don't have to. But now we have to now migrate that kind of thinking into our designs, where we know that using light gray text on a white background will not work. And switching to night mode, what are the limitations? And all these things are so important. So design, like I said before, is almost like doing math and science together, because it's moving in a direction where it's getting more intense. It's not about you liking blue and using blue color for something. It's more about legibility. Is it readable? How does this perform? Would this type expand with the page or not? How do I want this thing to respond? How do I want it to react? Now, the people who are using a lot of those principles right now are people who are marketing stuff. They put things in places where you could accidentally click on it and then you have to see an ad, or you have to interact with something before you can go to the next stage. Well, hopefully that would migrate into thinking for a just society so that everyone can access information the same way before we all get brain implants.
Till then. Yeah, it's just so interesting thinking about how, society, those mindsets, accessibility for designs, but just in terms of, technologies advancements, like just over the past couple of years, if you're looking back a decade, just how YouTube itself has changed. Like if you go back, you're like, this is what YouTube looked like 10 years ago. It is just a different beast.
It's very different. And it's kind of interesting, just to say this, when the internet started and web pages were being created, you could tell when a technical person created a page and when a designer was involved. At that time, designers had no knowledge of code. The crossover, or should I say synthesis, happened very slowly. And even way back then, we would be screaming, no, it's got to be a white background. If you read if you read black ink on white paper, why does it have to be different on screen? We used to fight those battles. And then slowly, we now have what everyone calls minimalist design. You've taken off all the flaming logos and the rotating whatevers, and everything is cleaner, so we're there now. And then we're moving in another direction where, some people think it's dark mode, and we'll keep fighting these things. When I say fight, is talking about them, discussing what are the pros, what are the cons, and why do you use this, and why should this switch to that? Like we talk about these things. So it's really exciting, actually. And I joke and I tell people when I'm 90, what I'm going to be doing in the seniors residence is I'll be writing little snippets of code to make their wheelchairs go faster.
Yeah, things change so quickly, and it's just it'll be interesting to see how things change and develop in terms of social media, AI, algorithms, and just when a new technology, when it comes out, it's going to change everything again. So like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how things change. Some things may change drastically, some things not so much, but it'll be interesting to see nonetheless.
And technology is always going to make some decisions for us based on the capabilities that they bring. So that's another area of discussion, but that's for another time.
Enjoying the content from You Multicultural? Why don't you subscribe to stay up to date with everything that we're doing? I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk. And have yourself a good one.